All right, so I'm super excited, you guys, to welcome a very special guest to the Terri Cole Show today, my friend, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about her because what we're going to be talking about today is her new book. We're also going to be talking about divorce and sort of the light at the end of the tunnel after divorce and breaking up and boundaries and love and all of the things. We're talking about all of them. But Elizabeth is the CEO and the director of Dr. Elizabeth Cohen and Associates, which is a group private practice in the heart of New York City, serving hundreds of clients a year. The practice is dedicated to teaching, witnessing, and encouraging clients to learn, grow, and heal so that they can feel mastery in their lives. We love that. How I know Elizabeth, though, is that she is she has an online divorce course and a membership group for people who are divorced, Afterglow, the light at the other side of divorce. And this course teaches women how to thrive, not just survive their divorce, no matter how difficult the process has been. So, of course, I've had clients going through divorce. We know each other through Kate Northrup. I was recommending people to go to your things, and now you've got a book. It's amazing.
Mm.
So, welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited about all the things. Now, let's start with your new book, which is called Light on the Other Side of Divorce, Discovering the New You. And I want to just know, I always ask anyone who's written a book, like, what motivated you to write this book and why now?
Mm. Thanks for asking that. There are two real moments in my life where I realized that I needed this book, which is why I wrote it, which I think many of us do, right? Research is me search. So I got divorced about I got divorced about 12 years ago, and there was a moment where my kids had finally gone to sleep. They were very little, 6 months and 2 years. I was, covered in food. I don't know if I'd taken a shower, and I plopped on my bed and I opened my laptop and I typed in divorce recovery program, divorce healing, and I couldn't find anything. And I didn't realize until very recently that not finding something was actually confirming a message I had thought about myself, which is that I was a failure and that I wasn't going to be able to move through this because there was no evidence. So I didn't want any woman or man to ever have to have that experience again. And specifically for this book, I wrote this book also for the person like me who would schlep her kids to the free library reading story hour and might peer out of the side of her eye and see light at the other side of divorce, just the possibility.
Mm.
So I created it for people to know that there's a possibility for something different than what we see everywhere and people say.
So, for you, what was the light on the other side of divorce for you?
Yeah, for me, it was the moment that after I had sat in the playground with some parents and they had asked me, "Oh, I don't see your ex a lot at school. Where is he?" And I decided to go into this story. I mean, I just told this story and so many of the difficult stories and so much of the challenges, and they were in awe and they were crying and they were so involved. And while it was happening, I felt really validated, really vindicated. And Terry, when I left, I felt like crap because
Mm.
here I had just spent all this time telling the story, which, by the way, I was a main character in, like, was really painful for me.
Hmm.
And I thought, I have a choice. I can continue to take his inventory and talk about him. And there are so many stories. Or I can figure out how the hell did I end up here? And how do I make sure I don't end up here again? So for me, the light at the other side of the divorce was taking the focus off of him and turning it on me.
Yeah, it's such an amazing point because now we could think about this when it comes to lots of things where we get really attached to our narrative, like super attached to this is how it is, black, white, that's it. This one's bad. This one's good. This one did
Yes.
this. This one did that. And there's something about repeating the stories that
Yes.
creates even deeper neural pathways than the experiences themselves, right? So we all know we have neural pathways in our brain. Any repeated anything, as you know, you're an MD, that we are literally digging those trenches in our brains even deeper around things that we actually don't want to do. So for you,
Yes.
what did you do after that? Like when you were like, okay, I'm sort of shifting the lens
Yeah.
through which I am experiencing this. And it's also sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like it also went from being this optical thing, like I don't want the neighbors to think this, to turning in to be like, okay, what do I need to heal?
Yeah. And so what I did was first of all, I spent a lot of time in support groups with other people who had been through the situation I had been in. I really became really careful. I believe that self-talk is self-hypnosis. So I
Mhm.
really started watching the words I used. So when someone would come to me and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you got divorced," I would say, "No, no, say congratulations. This
Mhm.
is actually a huge opportunity for me." So I really started kind of using different words. People would say, "How are you doing?" I'd say, I get to watch TV now in bed by myself. It's kind of fun. Like I would really just be very conscious of how I was seeing my experience, exactly as you said, Terry, to retrain my neural pathways to see my experience as an opportunity, as growth, and really to figure out, we had had trouble in our marriage for a very long time.
Mhm.
And I tell this story that my ex-husband struggles with alcoholism. And there was a moment where I realized that he had problems with drinking. And I looked at myself in the mirror and this is no lie. And I said, we are going to keep this secret. Like I actively said to myself,
Mhm.
push it down. And so I knew that that was where I needed to start. Why did I think it was okay to push it down? Very compassionately, I asked myself that question. No shame, but
Mhm.
pushing emotions down. Where does that come from? Where have I seen that before? And that just
Right.
opened up so much.
It's so interesting about the when you feel so threatened and when you are high functioning. And I
Yeah.
know because we've talked before that we both have a lot of these similarities of like high functioning sort of codependency where there is this bidding for control.
Yes.
There is this desire to avert the impending disaster, whether it's our disaster or not.
Mhm.
And it's like I could picture you looking in the mirror and saying, we're going to keep this secret because that was literally the only way to control what you knew somewhere down deep was coming down the line. Like there was no way to actually
Yes.
keep this secret as if it was your secret to keep. Like
Exactly.
impossible.
Exactly. And it's a really good point, Terry, because it wasn't that was the moment of codependence, right? His disease somehow became my secret. There is that's the work that I had to do, that someone's experience was not about me. It was about them and how to let them be their own person. And I've shared this before, I humbly say that I was with someone who was struggling because it made me feel better about myself. Like, no question. And I had
Mhm.
to look at that, I had to look at how that made me feel superior. And wow, if I need to feel superior, I must not be feeling so good about myself.
Yeah, it's interesting though the insight that you have, and clearly you wanted to know and to learn, or these things wouldn't have made it to your conscious mind.
Mhm.
But to really be able to look and go, okay, how did I get here? Right? What 50% of this experience did
Yes.
I co-create with this other person? And I think that a lot of folks listening or watching this on YouTube, there is a lot of bad feelings people have. And the one you said about feeling like a failure, I think is extremely common. I've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
People writing in and somehow feeling like there's such I don't know, there's such a like a negative vibe on divorce, even though 50 what percent of people are
Right.
divorced, right?
Right. Yeah. It's over 50%.
So what do you say to two things? Let's first
Yeah.
talk about people who are feeling like a failure and feeling shame
Mhm.
around the failure of the marriage. And then let's move into anger, shall we?
Yes, I love that. My two favorite feelings to talk about. So one of the things I don't think we can talk about our feelings of failure about divorce unless we talk about our expectations of marriage.
Mm.
You know, this idea, and I know you talk about this, that somehow, right? Look at Disney movies, right? Happily ever after. Let's
Mm.
not talk about that. They just go off and everything's perfect. Like, that's not real life. Real life are two people take a friggin' gamble, like you're like, let's try this together. We'll see. But we have this institution and this sense and this systemic feeling that it has to be perfect. And if it's not working, by the way, like no one asks people to stay in the same job for 50 years, right? No one says, oh, you're such a failure that you left your job after 15 years to go to it, to learn more about yourself, to go to graduate school. Why do we do that in marriage? So I think we really, and I have a part in the book where I talk about assumptions, like we really need to challenge our assumptions about marriage and about divorce. I encourage the people who come to me and say these and express this to say, I want you to just try on for a minute a different thought. The thought that my relationship has come to its perfect conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
love
just
that.
right. And then just notice how it lands in your body, that it did what it was supposed to do, and I release it. And it's really how we think about it. That's what's so amazing about the work that we do, right? It's really how we think about it changes how we feel.
It's so true. And it's like, the Wayne Dyer quote, right? Change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
And it's like, there is this assumption that like we've somehow cornered the market on like the truth in life, like this
Mm-hmm.
is the way it is, where the reality, and this is what's so fascinating about being in mental health and being therapists and psychiatrists and all the things that we do, it's like you can actually change your mind. And when you do, it literally will change your experience of the
Yes.
thing, right?
Yeah. And people don't believe it because we do think we have so much control over our mind, and we really don't. I always like to tell this story about this image of, you're standing there. I feel like during COVID, we felt this a lot. You're looking at a brick wall, you're standing there and you're thinking, I'm stuck. I'm here, this brick wall. There's no way I can move. And then someone taps you on the shoulder and you turn your head just slightly and you're in a garden. This wall was simply just a wall in the garden. And
Right.
so we're so myopic, especially when we're going through a trauma like divorce. And so I want people to know that if you just move just the littlest bit, you will see so much more possibility for you. And just changing what you say and how you respond can really, someone just told me recently, instead of calling them your ex, which is very, dichotomous, like some
Mm-hmm.
people say husband, but say the person I was married to, or my
Mm-hmm.
former spouse, right? It's actually emotionally and energetically different than saying my ex,
Yeah. There's
right?
something about the ex that seems very harsh,
Yeah.
where you're like, uh, excommunicated, like
Yes.
there's something about it where you're like, that's not, and it doesn't have to be that way either, meaning it doesn't have to be super painful. It doesn't have to
Oh,
be acrimonious. Like that's really
right.
modern divorce isn't really doesn't have to be like that anymore. So tell us a little bit about what do we do with righteous anger when people get divorced and they're like rightfully angry. What do we do with that?
Um, yeah, so I want people to know that they have every right to have anger, because there are parts of your divorce and parts of life in general that cause anger. We need to allow it. In our communities, we really accept one or two feelings: joy, surprise, excitement, just the positives. And it's really important for people to know that emotions are excitations in the brain. They have no valence. Sad, angry, guilt, shame, they're the same in your brain. It's us who attributes the negative impact that it should have. So, first, I just want to start with anger's fine. Like, no one says, oh, you're a little too joyful, right? Like, why don't you slow the joy down? I mean, no, why do we have to slow the anger down? So, just know you have anger and it's okay. And if you don't experience it, if you push it down, it comes out sideways, and you have road rage, you snap at your kids, you snap at your partner, you snap at your friends. And so I want to encourage people to not think about anger, but actually to embody the anger. So we know that when you're going through divorce, which is a traumatic experience, you're going to have a natural fight response. The fight, flight, or freeze response is a
Mhm.
biologically adaptive technique. And I encourage people to have those feelings in the privacy of your own home. Put on a song, For me, it's Killing in the Name of by Rage Against the Machine. And let your body feel the anger, move through it, punch a pillow, really experience it, knowing you're not taking this outside. This is for your body to process and integrate the anger and not to be afraid of it. It's a gift, as you know, Terry, to anyone you live with or in contact with for you to process your anger.
It's so true, but there's something really profound about what you're saying by having like a physical experience and a physical representation
Yeah.
of this emotion. Because I think that there's something very powerful about whether it's taking up boxing, whether it's something that you are sort of putting your stake in the ground, you know, and putting the universe on notice, like, this is my anger. I
Mhm.
own it. I'm also processing it. I'm also moving through it because really we all know people who've gotten divorced and have stayed rageful for decades, just
Yes,
still just as mad. You're like, okay, it was 24 years ago. Please stop. Like,
totally.
what is it doing for you to hold on to it? Right.
Right. Right. There's a Buddhist quote that holding on to anger is like holding hot coals and throwing them at someone, like you're the one who gets burned, right?
Right.
Like you're just
Right.
constantly burned.
So what do you think about people wanting to jump back into the dating pool? Because I
Mhm,
have a lot of women in my courses who are like, I haven't dated. I've been either my husband passed away, so
mhm,
4 years ago, and now I'm getting back in, or I'm divorced for 6 months or whatever it is. So
mhm.
what are your suggestions for women who want to get back in the dating pool but are have trepidation about doing so?
Yeah. So first, I want to say you're not alone. Many people feel uncomfortable stepping back in. I think there's another like stigma that somehow you're supposed to like, well, you work talk about this all the time, Terry, that like if you're ready to walk into a relationship, then you're ready to heal. Like those are not two things. Like you might choose to be healed and not be in a relationship. Let's not equate relationships with health
Right. Agreed.
because that really sets people up for huge amounts of failure because sometimes you just don't meet somebody. I really encourage, I have in my book, and I can share this with your audience, something I created called the Relationship Pattern Excavator, where you really compassionately, gently, and lovingly take some time to look at your past relationships and look at things like, how quickly did I get into it? How quickly did I tell them I love them or meet their family or have sex or whatever?
Hmm.
Was there anything about them that I thought was problematic? Like really just lovingly doing an inventory and then looking for patterns. Because again, this focus is not on them, but on you. How are you in that relationship? And maybe you want, if you're not going through a divorce and you've been widowed, maybe you want to do exactly what you did before. And maybe you want to try something a little different. And I give this example in my book that I didn't know until I went through all the support, that men could be humble. I didn't grow up with a parent who could do that. And so once I learned that, that became number one on my list because I kept finding the same people. And then all these new people showed up once humble was on my list. And so people say, oh, there's not enough people. But that sometimes can be, I wonder if you think this, Terry, because you're still looking for that same person.
I think that I look a lot. I do think that's true, but I also
Yeah.
think that there's secondary gain, right, in
Mm,
saying all the people are gone or all the good ones are taken or all the gay or
yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Because if we think about like, well, what do we, if that's true, right, and all the good ones are gone, then what are you as the person who's claiming you want to be in a relationship, but also claiming there's no good people left on planet Earth? What do you get to not face, not feel, and not experience by that, staying stuck where you are in that
Mm,
belief? Well,
mm.
obviously, you get to not be vulnerable, not be
Yep.
rejected, and
Yep.
not have to be in a situation where you don't feel masterful.
Yeah.
So I think both. I think that people are in some ways looking for the same thing.
Yeah.
But what I love about the book that you've written, Elizabeth, is that this is in going through all of the chapters and all the things, it's like this is like getting your PhD in yourself. So there's a lot of healing in the
Yeah.
book, and strategies and techniques and case studies and all of these things that are like, okay, here are data points that are great. But you're also lovingly guiding the reader to look for patterns
Yeah.
in their life and to value themselves and to reframe the experience, because this is how we're doing it to make a different experience,
Yes.
right? We're understanding what happened. This is to not repeat, right? We
Yes.
have to understand what happened.
Exactly.
So, the light at the end of the tunnel, what do you say about people who are women, men who are holding on to a lot of resentment
Hmm.
from the past, from what they experienced?
Yeah. So I think, and as therapists, we're uniquely trained in being able to process grief and loss. And so I think there's two pieces to the resentment. I think the first piece is acknowledging that there are things that you need to grieve, that you need to acknowledge. I talk in the book about how, even if you hate the person now, there was a moment where you envisioned a life with them.
Yeah.
And we have to grieve that. So I have this exercise where you actually write the story, write your dream that you had with that person. Write it if you can on a piece of paper that we then release, whether in any sort of ritual, because we need to really acknowledge that at one point there was this wish and this desire. And the second piece of the resentment, Terry, this is one of the hardest parts of the book, is really to look at your ex partner and think, I did it again, the person you were with, your former partner, and see if you can find a few things that you fell in love with. You don't have to tell them, this isn't like, for them, this is for you. So you can soften a little around them.
There's something really, really beautiful about the process and having some
Mm,
kind of a ritual. And from my therapeutic standpoint, we're really looking at that is the true process of grieving, because
mm,
we can't honestly grieve if we only say that was just all crap. That was just all
mm-hmm.
terrible. Everything about the person was crap and they're terrible and they're the worst and it was the worst.
Yeah.
That is not true, or you
Right.
would not have stayed or married them to begin with.
Right.
And in getting more of the balance, like you're talking about, what was true, yes, you must mourn, but there's something so, I just love that, Elizabeth. I feel like it's
Mm,
so helpful
mm,
to, it sounds like a relatively quick thing to do, but you're really giving yourself the space to let go of this armor that you're trying to protect yourself from being hurt with, but it's just so friggin' heavy and it takes so much bandwidth. And you're like, Jesus, who has the energy?
yeah. Oh my God. It's like when they say like someone's living in your mind rent free, like they're not thinking about it all the time. You're the one who's still holding on to it. And if you have children, knowing those three positive things about your partner, you you must, if you can, tell your kids that you see those beautiful characteristics in them because they are part of them. And they get very scared when you leave that partner and they think maybe there's something about me that they won't like. And so it's really important for your kids, for yourself, and really to release, as you said, to let go and to give yourself another chance to find a few things that are positive. Doesn't have to be all of them.
So, how do you think, Elizabeth, that the couples who are endlessly bad mouthing
Yeah.
the former partner to children, what impact do you think that might have on children? Just curious.
Yeah. I think I say this all the time, like never talk smack about the other person to your children. Call your friend, get a therapist, get my book, get a friggin' journal. It is an impossible situation to put a child in. Think about, when your two friends got in an argument and you were in the middle, multiply that times 1,000,000,000. Children have, that's a real number, 1,000,000,000. Children have a biological, attachment to their parent, to both parents that they need to survive. And if you threaten that by bad mouthing the other one, that child feels as insecure as if they were left in a mall parking lot alone. Like that's how much they need the other parent. And I know it sucks. It sucks because you hate the other parent, or you don't like the other parent, or you wish they would disappear. I remember I said to my therapist early on in my divorce, I said, honestly, I just wish that he would die. I just wish he wasn't here and he would die. And she said, you know what? Even if he dies, they still have a relationship with him. Like they will always have a relationship. It doesn't go away. You cannot erase that. So you are going to hurt them deeply if you talk smack about your other partner.
Yep. Okay. So it's interesting. I remember thinking, like, my parents got divorced when I was
Yeah.
13, and they did a really great job of not bad mouthing each other at all. And then when I got to be like 19, my mother started like telling me things where I was like, why are you? And I was
Yeah.
looking at her like, please don't, whatever you're
Yes.
saying, stop. And I remember we went out for ice cream one night and I said, Mom, I am going to try to explain something to you. When you tell me something, a bad story about, because listen, my parents are like, like Methodists from upstate New York. Like, she wasn't telling me anything ridiculously inappropriate, but just crap I don't need to know. You have friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that. Yeah, I don't need to know. And I remember saying to her, Mom, I can't explain it any better than this. When you say something bad about Dad, it makes me feel like I'm bad.
Yes.
And she was like, oh my God, Terry, I didn't mean, I was like, but I'm telling you. So please don't, because
Yes.
I love you. And I remember at one point she was like, oh, so you girls, because I have 3 sisters, so you girls can tell me everything, but I can't. I was like, yeah,
Yes. That's what being a mother is.
that's called being a parent. And
Exactly. That's the
I
boundary.
promise not to burden my own kids with some inappropriate shit. Like, no. And
Right.
she listened and stopped doing it, but that was like the most succinct way I could describe
Wow.
what it was. And she was barely saying anything bad. And I was still like, oh my
Right.
God, it makes you want to defend. You want to be like, you're
Yeah.
wrong. And why are you saying that?
Yes. Oh my gosh, Terry, your boundaries at 19. Dang, that was amazing. Impressive that you could articulate I feel statements. I love that. Oh my gosh.
Right. But okay. But part of that is because I had then and have now, truthfully,
Yeah.
the most amazing mother who I knew she would care. If I were able to tell her why something and I
Mm,
wanted her to not do it, I knew if I could just get it out, she
yeah.
would absolutely care and
Yeah.
work to not do it. And she did.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I
And
don't know
people
that I
need
would
to
have had
know.
that.
Yeah. And people need to know that not all kids feel that comfortable doing that, but that's exactly what they're saying. That, and also I say this to so many parents, and I talk about it in the book. If your kids hear you talking behind anyone's back about anyone, they are going to assume you are going to do that about them. They cannot differentiate the way we can with adult brains. They can't understand. You can't comprehend, oh, she fell out of love with Dad, but but when she talks badly about him, she's just in a phase and she'll they can't think like that.
Mm-mm.
So it has to be very simple. That's why it's like there's not a lot of rules that I say in life, but that is, do not talk about the other person to your kids. If you can't say anything nice, honestly, don't say anything at all.
Yep. Yep. Because when you really put it in that frame, Elizabeth, it makes it a lot easier not to do it. Where
Yeah.
think of that mean thing that you're saying about your former partner as if you were saying it about your child to their face.
Exactly.
And you probably wouldn't do it.
And
Probably
that kid
not.
is in an impossible position. As you said, you want to defend, they're in an impossible position because they love you both.
Right. That's like the typical double bind, right?
Exactly.
Screwed if you
Exactly.
do and screwed if you don't.
Exactly. And not to scare people, but I will say, like, if you do that to your child, they will be more likely to be in a relationship where somebody wants them to be in double binds, right? To be in a less healthy relationship.
Yep, it's painful. All right, I have 2 questions I want to ask
Yes.
you for our Boundary Boss talks. So,
Yes.
personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how did you overcome it?
So my most difficult boundary struggle was when I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old, and my husband at the time could not get sober. And I would have this experience where every night when I would wake up and find him passed out somewhere in the house, I would think to myself, this is it. I'm done. I'm finished. No more. And then the next morning, he'd wake up apologetically, clean the house. I'd have these two little kids, and I'd think, I can't, forget it. Let's hope it
Yep.
doesn't happen. Over and over. So the biggest boundary I ever set was actually when I changed the locks.
Mm.
I just, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't, and I actually changed the locks. I mean, that was like a physical boundary. And this person was very ill, but I had to set that boundary for the sake of my kids, but really for me too.
Right. For both. Wow, that's amazing. And the last question
Yeah.
is, why do you think personal boundaries are important in relationships and in life?
Oh, personal boundaries, I think, are your blueprint, right? They're your instruction manual. They teach another person what's okay and what's not okay.
Yep.
In fact, personal boundaries are the clearest form of communication, and all relationships need healthy communication.
Wow. I love that so much. I agree with you, of course. All right. So tell everyone where they can get your book and where they can see you and where can they find you?
So you can find all of my programs and my book at drelizabethcohen.com, and that's DR. And you can find my book everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And I just want to give a little shout out for Bookshop, which is a collection of independent booksellers where you can also find it there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, my friend. It
Mm,
was so nice having you. I'm so excited about this book and that it's now out in the world so it can lessen the suffering of others and elevate joy.
Thank you so much, Terry, for having me. It was such an honor.